Good afternoon. It is August 31st, 2020, the last day of the month of August. And this is Maria Quattrone with Be The Solution. And I welcome my guest today, Steve Rozenberg. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Maria. I appreciate you having me on.
I'm so excited to speak with you. It's very strange how you get connected to people, and I love your energy and enthusiasm that you bring to the table. So tell us a little bit about you, Steve.
Sure. Yeah. So I live in Houston, Texas, not from there, originally from Los Angeles, born and raised. I came here because of a job that I had, a career, and that job was an airline pilot. And I still am an airline pilot. I fly for a major carrier to this day. But my life took a bit of a turn, as probably many people did, that I thought that I had a safe and secure job as an airline pilot. It's all I ever wanted to do as a kid was fly airplanes. And up until a certain day in history, I was doing exactly what I wanted and had the most safe and probably the most secure job that I thought existed. And the day that changed for me was 9/11. So we all know there was obviously the huge tragedies that happened. For me, the 3 days following 9/11 was kind of my day of reckoning, because that is when I was given a furlough notice. And the safe, secure job that I thought I had was actually not safe. It wasn't secure. And because I was so specialized by being a pilot, I realized that I had spent my whole life training a skill set that I really could not do anything else if I wasn't flying a plane. Well, I was about to be on the street with about 50,000 other airline pilots that were getting furloughed. So there was not a lot of jobs, or any jobs, as a matter of fact. People were going all over the world, flying in Asia and South America. And it really made me realize that I was a cog in a very big wheel, and I had no control over my destiny. And at the swipe of a pen, companies were going bankrupt. They were wiping out pensions. People that were about to retire didn't know what they were going to do. And it was a very odd time. And it was actually a very humbling time, I would say, because you go to school to learn something and you're doing what you love doing. And then you realize that at the swipe of a pen of shareholders, which I understand that's what they need to do. They need to protect their company. But at any point you are collateral damage and you're dismissive. And I just remember that time in my life thinking, what am I going to do? Because, normally when an industry changes, even what's going on right now, when an industry changes, we all kind of know that it's coming and we can see trends are happening. Well, for those of you that do or don't remember 9/11, this was in a matter of 72 hours, my whole world changed. And so I realized that I needed to do something to control my destiny so that I wouldn't put myself and my family in this position again. And so I started just trying to figure out, what do people do that are creating wealth? Like, how do you control? And understand, I didn't know anything except flying an airplane, because that's all I ever did.
Sure.
So I started seeing people. Go ahead.
Do you feel like today in 2020 that you're brought back to 9/11 again with COVID? I mean, how does that play into today? It's different because you've changed. We're going to talk about that, but from a standpoint of what's happening in the industry then versus now, and the amount of people not flying.
It's very eerie how similar it is, to be honest with you. I tell people reach out to me. I wrote a book about my story, and people reach out to me and they ask me, and they say, man, is this what you went through during 9/11? And I tell them, yes, it is. The difference between myself today and myself 20 years ago is the action that I've taken between this time frame. And I'm in a much different position because I took action. I took responsibility and accountability to learn how to be a better person and how to make sure that I was educating myself in another industry, which was real estate. But very, very much so. And what's very interesting is many of the people that were my peers at the time that we were going through the 9/11 days, 20 years later, they're coming back to me saying, man, I should have done something. Now I'm in the same freaking position I was in before, and I didn't do anything. And now what if the airline goes out of business? What if we close our doors? And so I'm thinking to myself, you had the choice. Like you saw me working, grinding, doing all these things. You chose not to do something. I chose to do something. So I mean, not that I don't feel sorry for them, but I think to myself, you created your own mess by being lazy, is as bluntly as I can put it for people. So yes, it is very, very similar.
Well, we write our own books, Steve, right?
We write a page every single day, like David Goggins says. It's just, do you go back and read it, and do you learn from it? And I have learned my lesson. I learned I touched that hot stove. Now, I made a lot of mistakes. I've learned a lot of lessons. I've been taught many, many times what not to do. Kept getting punched in the face, but I kept getting up, and I kept getting up. And I learned that, you know what, eventually they run out of punches, or you figure out a way not to get hit in the face. And so, I've had a very long journey. But you know what? I'm in a much different place than I was 20 years ago with what's going on today.
How did you make that decision back then? I mean, what are some of the first steps that you took that somebody could take today that's in the same position? Because, right, it's almost never too late to start.
Yeah, I agree. It's never too late, right? It's a mindset shift that you have to have. You have to go from the mindset of being victim to saying, you know what, I'm going to take accountability. Just because I graduated high school or college doesn't mean that I should stop learning, right? Because you're like a tree, you're either growing or dying. And so what I would tell people that want to get started is sometimes you've got to self-reflect. You've got to look in yourself and be humble enough to let your ego and pride go and say, you know what, I am in a bad position and I've got to figure this out, and take accountability and say, you know what, it's up to me to be responsible enough to not blame. I could have blamed 9/11. I mean, look, everything that happened in 9/11, I didn't cause. I had nothing to do with what happened, but I was directly affected by it. Right. So yes, I could have blamed, I could have done all these things, or I said, you know what, I'm going to take accountability and I'm going to start learning. And so what I did is I read about a book a week. Once I realized real estate was where I wanted to go, because that's where wealth was created for the majority of people that I was learning about, I took it upon myself and I read about a book a week. Every single week I read and I learned, and I really, really consumed myself in this society called real estate that I knew nothing about. And the clock was ticking for me because I didn't know if there was going to be another terrorist attack or something was going to happen, and I don't know if you remember that time frame, but it was like we had H1N1, we had SARS, then we had problems with foot and mouth disease. I mean, it was like we would joke that we would think the locusts were coming next for the airlines, because it was every single price was $100 a barrel. I mean, it was just unbelievable how that was going to sustain itself, and it just kept chugging along. But I was luckily I never got furloughed, but I was 30 from the bottom. So I was skimming the bottom, and every time there was a hiccup, I was getting pushed and whipped around to different bases, different cities, flying around. And I just thought, man, if we breathe wrong, this is going sideways. And I thought to myself, if I don't do something, it's my fault. I am responsible and I am accountable to change my own life. And so that's what I did.
You sure did. So how did you start with your first investment property? Did you have a mentor?
Yes, I had a mentor. I paid someone about $10,000 to learn how to flip a property, and I learned all these terms like double closings and options and wholesaling, and I did that for quite a while in the beginning. I did a lot of options and a lot of wholesaling of properties before it was even called wholesaling. It was back in 2002, but I got very, very good at it. And what I learned is I can make more money through negotiating than I can with my hands, because I'm not very technical on building 2x4s together. So I learned how to negotiate, and I learned a lot about scripting and how to communicate with people. And I realized that that's where the skill set comes in, or that at least that's my unique ability. And so I started going down that path of wholesaling properties, and I got very good at it. I ended up making enough money that I went into partnerships with an apartment complex because I made so much money from flipping wholesaling properties.
How many were you doing?
I was probably wholesaling anywhere between 3 to 8 properties a month. We were wholesaling a lot of them. And in my mind, I was always trying to figure out, how do I systematize this? How do I automate this? And so everything that I was doing when I was doing this, I was like, there's got to be a way to automate this. So I was kind of creating a systems manual. Coming from the airline industry, everything we do is systematized. It's got checklists. And so I kept thinking, there's got to be a way to figure this out. So I started kind of plugging in, and this is, YouTube wasn't around. None of that was around. I'm kind of dating myself, but none of that was around back then. So I had to figure out these systems and ways to automate as much as possible, which I did a pretty good job. But ultimately that was a job. And that was the problem with wholesaling, was it's only as good as I am. If I stop, or if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, the revenue stops. So I always wanted the passive income, but I didn't know how to get there because I wasn't making a lot early on as an airline pilot. I didn't know how to do it. I was a little chicken. To be honest, I was a little afraid to go take that actual commitment step because I didn't know if I was going to be out of a job or not. And I didn't want to be a blamer. So I thought, okay, I can make this revenue from another way, which I did. So bought an apartment complex. And then from there, that's when I started going down the path of, we sold the apartment complex, and then I started buying rental properties. And that kind of got me on the path that carried on for the next 10 plus years.
So from the rental property standpoint, do you have property management for that? How do you handle yours?
Well, that's a funny story. So, you come back from owning an apartment complex that we just sold. This is right in the demise of the global recession. And we thought we were the smartest people in the world because we just sold an apartment complex, made a good amount of money. The church next, I'm sorry?
How many units did you have?
It was like a 40-unit apartment complex. It was a C complex in Houston. So it was a good size, and I was trying to cut my teeth on it and understand a little bit of it. There was 4 partners. We sold it. The church next door bought it from us because it was landlocked, and we knew that. There was a school on one side and a church on the other. So the church wanted it. So, and this is right when everything was starting to go in the tank. Luckily, what I've realized is when you deal with the church, they pay cash. So that was a plus because they didn't need financing. And so we decided that me and one of the people, there's 4 of us, me and one of the other persons, we got along really well. He had known more about apartments and I had known more about the wholesaling. He wanted to learn what I did and I wanted to learn what he did. It's kind of the grass is greener. So we kind of made an agreement. Hey, you show me, I'll show you. And so we started looking at properties and we thought, why don't we just buy a property together and let's just see how it goes. Let's see it. So we bought a property and, so far so good. Now we had money burning a hole in our pockets and not a lot of education, which is probably the worst scenario that you could have on the subject. So he says to me one day, he says, hey man, he goes, I found there's these properties here, and this is in Houston. He's like, there's these properties here. He's like, there's a ton of them. We can get a great return. He's like, I ran the numbers on paper. The ROI and the cash on cash is great. He's like, we can buy as many of these as we want, and there's tons of people that rent them. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't see a downside. He goes, yeah, they're called low income properties, low income, high cash flow. He's like, these are winners. And I'm like, okay, well, why buy one? Let's push chips all in, right? Let's buy as many as possible. So in about a year and a half, we buy about 20 of these properties. And then we realized why people don't own them in massive scale, because all of a sudden the phone started ringing and people wanted stuff. And these people were tenants and they wanted things fixed that were broken, that they broke. They wanted to tell us that they couldn't pay rent. They wanted to tell us that they were leaving, that they were evicting, that they were this. And all of a sudden we realized we had made a pretty large tactical error because we wanted properties that were going to be passive income, not hands-on. And for anyone that's ever owned low-income properties, I think it's a good solution, but it wasn't a good solution for us. It was the wrong business model. So we're working through these problems, trying to figure this out. And through our ultimate wisdom, we thought the best way to fix this problem is buy more of them. So we buy about another 15 or 20 of these properties. So now we're sitting on about 40 of these things. And it was like putting gasoline on a fire that just exploded in our faces. It was unbelievably horrible. That's all I could say. I mean, we were getting ripped off. Our average tenants were staying 8 months. Our make-ready costs were 3 times the amount because when the tenants would leave, they would like to take parting gifts with them, like wiring, electrical, all those kind of things. So we'd have to basically come back to the shell of the house. So we'd never even get our return from the last make-ready. We'd have to redo it. And we were just in this vicious cycle because honestly, I think we were so emotionally attached to trying to make it work. We were actually making the situation worse. And so we got to a point that my wife actually told me, you suck at buying houses. You need to stop because if you buy another one, it better be nice because you will be living in it. So that was when I kind of realized I have a problem and I'm buying bad properties. And I kept, for people watching, the biggest lesson that I could tell you is I kept thinking I could fix the problem. I kept thinking if I buy more, I can prove everyone wrong and I can fix it. And all it was doing was proving them right and proving me wrong. And I would not let my ego get out of the way of what logic and what the numbers were actually telling me. The numbers were dictating and telling me the numbers didn't work. I refused to accept that. And so after we had about 40 properties and we went through a couple of hurricanes and we were losing money on these properties, and anyone that's ever had bad deals, you get these sleepless nights where you don't know how you're going to make your mortgages, and you almost become a victim of the phone ringing, because every time the phone rings, someone's either yelling at you, or it's bad news, or there's or it's going to cost me money. And I didn't even want to answer my phone anymore. And I was thinking, what am I doing? Like, I'm an airline pilot. Why am I doing this? Like, this is so stupid. And the worst part was I put myself in that position. I actually did this to myself. So then I had to figure out, how are we going to get out of this? And so, like everything in life, we do what we must, not what we should, right? We knew we should get out of the properties, but when it became a must, and that must, we had a 0 point in our lives, me and my business partner, and I write about it in my book. We were basically cleaning out a property that was just trashed, and we had cockroaches on us and trash and all this stuff. And finally, he's like, what are we doing? Either we fix this, or we have to figure out a better way, or we get rid of these properties. And so that basically was our 0 line. And I'll never forget in my life that day. And then we started working our way out of the problem. And eventually we created systems and structure. He was in the IT industry. I was an airline pilot. So we knew what to do. We just weren't doing it. And eventually that led to us creating a property management company, which we ended up growing to over 1,000 properties under management, and won a lot of national awards. We learned how to run business. And the whole time, going back to one of your original questions, one of the first things we did is we got a mentor and we got a business coach. And that business coach carried us through for the next 7 years, every single week, on basically kicking our butts and making sure we were doing the right things. And that is actually what got us to a very, very successful business that we eventually sold to a larger company and exited the deal.
It's a great story. So I want to know.
Yeah.
How long did you beat your head up against the wall for before you decided that this isn't working any longer with the properties?
It was really one of those things that I realized, you don't realize you have a problem when you're in it. And so I had that, and one of the things I learned is I was so focused in the tunnel. I had blinders on, and in my view, I was doing everything right. Like I drew that line in the sand, and I let my emotions get in the way of business. And I always tell people, and I talk from experience, I've got the scars and the battle wounds. I say, never let an emotional reaction drive a business decision. So it was about 1.5 years. I mean, it got to the point when we were buying properties, I would flip the HUD statement, because my wife did the accounting. So I would flip the HUD statement into the file and create a new file. And she's like, did you guys buy a new property? And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, I didn't tell you. Yeah, we got a new property. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it'll be fine. I'm like, this is a good one. She's like, are you kidding me? So it was that low point that everyone will have at some point, right? Our day of reckoning. We had our day of reckoning at this property that we just said, we are doing this completely wrong. And one of the problems is we knew other people in the industry, and they had 0 problems like we did, because they bought good properties based on their business model. And so the biggest lesson I've learned is, if someone were to ask me, like, Steve, what would you do different? I would say the first thing I would do is I would create my goals and my end destination, because I didn't have one. I was just buying deals to buy deals because someone who normally was the person selling me the property said, this is a great deal. And I thought, oh, he says it's a great deal. I want to prove that I'm an investor. So I'm going to buy this deal and show everyone that I can make this work. Well, it was a good deal for him. Number one, probably because he was selling it. But number two, he had a different goal and a different destination. So he had a different strategy than me. And nobody, the one thing I'll say, Maria, is nobody ever asked me, hey, Steve, why are you buying those properties? Now, again, I take accountability and I take responsibility. I did this. But I just wish, like, gosh, if somebody would have asked me, like, why are you doing this? This is not going to get you to the goal of passive income based on what you're doing. I maybe would have stopped and thought this through. But I was thinking, if I'm busy, I'm good. If I'm busy, I'm good. Well, there's no such thing that says success is going to, hard work is equated to success, right? I know a lot of people, myself included at the time, that worked my ass off and I wasn't successful. And I know a lot of people that work their whole lives and they don't get success. So we want to hope and dream that that's the reality, but that's our hope and vision. That's not reality. So I think that, a lot of times we want this answer, but we're afraid to really ask the question. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I learned is I never actually, again, I can say nobody helped me, but I never asked. So I should have asked. And when I saw that the numbers were not correct, going back to your question, I should have been smart enough and adult enough to say, you know what, we have a problem. We need to assess this. And I never did that.
But lesson learned. Now what? Now here you are. You built a successful company. You took it. So when you started your property management, did you put your 40 units into that, your 40 properties that you single family rentals you owned?
Yeah. What's funny is we actually started that. Yeah, we actually started that company really for self-preservation. We just said, we've got to, we sat down when we had this moment. We sat down and said, okay, we have three choices. One, we sell all the properties and walk away and lick our wounds and call it. The second is we hand it over to another management company and let them deal with it. And the third option was not the one that we wanted, was we do it ourselves. Well, this is in about 2010, just to give you a time frame. Nobody's getting loans to get a property at that time. So selling them was not an option. So that was out. So then my business partner says to me, he says, hey, you know what? Let me call some management companies, because we owned apartments. We knew people, what to do. We just weren't doing it. He says, let me make some phone calls. Let me do some interviews, and then we'll hand these off and we'll be done with it. So like a week and a half later, he calls me up and he's like, hey man, we got a problem. I'm thinking, oh my God, don't tell me we bought another property. My wife is going to kill me. And he's like, no, he goes, nobody will take them. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, nobody wants these properties. He said they said they'll never make money. They're too hard, and you don't make enough return from a management perspective because they're only $600-700 a month. He said, and they're too time intensive. And they said, there's nothing they can do to help us. And he called like 3-4 companies. And I'm like, are you shitting me? I'm like, you told me these were good deals. Like, that's why we got into this. And he's like, I don't know what to say. He's like, we've got a problem. I'm thinking, oh my God. So anyway, so we said, okay, obviously we're not the smartest people in the world because of what we've done, but we're not the dumbest. Like, we know what to do. We're just not doing it. So we said, okay, you know what? If we're going to do this, let's sit down and let's plumb the infrastructure of how we investors would want our properties managed. And so what happened was, it took us about 6 months. And we just said, we're coming up with rules. And if they don't abide by the rules, they have to pay the price, meaning they're evicted, they're paying late fees, whatever it is, we are removing our emotions. We ended up kicking out about 70% of our deadbeat tenants who really weren't paying their rent anyway, so they should have gone. And all of a sudden what happened was, eventually they started working correctly and they started becoming passive investments. They never actually made us a lot of money, but they stopped bleeding us to death. And what happened is we had other people that we knew approach us and said, hey, what happened? Like, you guys were in a horrible situation and it seems like you fixed yourself. So we told them what we did, and they said, oh my God, that's the same problems I'm having to a degree. Could you manage our properties? And at first we thought about it and we thought, hell no, we don't want your problems. Like, we barely fixed ours. Like, the last thing we want to do is take on someone else's problem. But then we thought about it and we thought, you know what, maybe we could grow this way and use economies of scale of growing this model. And maybe there's something here. So we didn't know anything about property management, but what we did is when we went to a business coach and we said, here's what we did. Here's what we think this can do. Do we have a business? And so he looked at everything and he sat down with us and he said, well, here's the thing. He said, you have scalability, you have marketability, and there's definitely opportunity. So by definition, yes, you have a business potential. You two are not the smartest guys in the world. You've proven you don't know what you're doing, and you'll be bankrupt in 6 months if you try and do this on your own. So we hire him. So he's probably the best closer of all, because we closed him on the spot.
So
huh?
He sold himself right into a gig.
Yeah. So we didn't even know that we had a business. We hired him, just to give some time reference here, we hired him June 1st of 2012. December 1st of 2012 is when we say we burned our boats, because my business partner quit his full-time job. We hired our first FTE, our first full-time employee, and our properties were the majority of them. Within about 6-8 months, we had about double the size. We had about 80 properties under managed. But the problem was our properties were the worst ones of the portfolio. We were actually bringing the whole thing down with our properties, which the person we hired, the property manager that we hired, she said, you guys either need to fix this or you guys need to get fired as clients because your properties suck. And we're like, we know. And so eventually we ended up selling the properties and found some creative ways to get out of the properties for a win-win solution. But again, the one thing that I've learned that I am a huge proponent of, which is kind of, I think, going back to your question, where I'm going now is I'm a huge believer in surrounding myself with better people. I'm a big believer in educating, being coached, being mentored, whatever you want to call, whatever the acronym, the consulting, whatever. I want to be around someone who's already walked that walk. And so I've been helping a lot of people recently with that, doing a lot of stuff. And so that's kind of where my life, I think, is the trajectory of my life is headed now.
How are you helping them?
Well, I do a lot of stuff. First thing I do is I do a free mastermind every week. I don't charge for it. I've been doing it for about 3 months. I've got about 1,000 people in the group. I get about 100 plus people on every week. And what I do more is I do 2 things in this. Number one, I know a lot of people out there like the tactical way of doing stuff, right? How do you flip a property and they get someone in here who's been this guru and they've done it. But I notice what a lot of people don't talk about is the mental side of it. And I'm a big believer that the mental side is what keeps people from success. So it's the language we say to each other, right? What do we say when the lights come off and I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking to myself, am I going to go forward or am I not? And a lot of people talk about, what are you going to do and these big grandiose plans of syndication and this and that. But the reality is, and you know this as probably as well as I do, is that people don't even they don't even cross the starting line, let alone the finish line. And a lot of that is because the things they say to each other, that who are they surrounded by? Like, how does somebody go from 0 properties just to 1? Like, forget 20 or 30 or 50. How do you go from someone that says, hey, I've got a 9-to-5 job and I just want something else? And so that's where I help people. How do you go to 1 property? Like, let's just make it basic. Then once you get to 1, how do you get to 5, right? There's a repetitive, you look at successful people, you can see their traits, right? It leaves clues. And so my belief is that if I can help people think differently, I can help them be successful. It's not the mechanics. I'm not going to teach them how to grow a 3rd arm. I'm going to teach them how to think about what they do and are they focused and intentional with their day and with their time to be more successful. And so that's where, look, I'm still an airline pilot. I sold my business. I'm doing fine. I don't need the money. I like helping people. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to help as many people as I can by doing this. I do a lot of videos on social media and stuff. I enjoy it. I enjoy that part of it. And I just feel like that's something that we should all do because I think as entrepreneurs, I think we can be very selfish. And what I mean by that is, we're very good at educating ourselves, right? People probably watching this video, people going to seminars, reading books. But the problem is once we're done with that, do we share that with anyone? Do we share it with our spouse or loved ones? Do we help our kids? Do we make generational wealth, or are we selfish and do we contain it? So, one of the things that a lot of people know about me is my son at 14 years old bought his first rental property. And everyone asks me, well, how did he get a loan? How did he do this? How did he do that? And I tell him, I go, you're asking the wrong question. You keep asking me how. You should be asking me why. Why did a 14-year-old come to me and say, hey, Dad, I've seen what you've been doing and I want to own a rental property? Why did he think that way? So I tell people, everybody's focused on the how, the do part. No one ever thinks about who they have to become and focus on that first. So that's kind of where I help people with, because I, as you can tell, I kind of have a passion for that because I think it's lacking. I don't think people talk about that enough. And you know as well as I do, there's many, many people out there that are very successful, very wealthy, and they're miserable because they're really not doing what they want to do. They're doing what they think they should do. And I think that they don't have that why, and they never really stop to think about the why. They just think, I'm going to get on the highway and I'm going to start buying properties and I'll figure it out as I go. Well, in flying, we say that's like building the plane in the air. All that's going to do is take you to the crash site even quicker. So same thing when you're buying real estate to buy real estate, which is what I did. That just took me to my crash site quicker. And so if I can help people avoid that, of coming up with a goal and a strategy, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, it all begins with the mindset
Absolutely.
Say it's probably 90%.
Oh, yeah, if not more. I mean, you know, you can say the 80 Pareto principle, 80-20, you can say what you want, but the reality is, you know, to go from 90% to the top 3%, so you go from 90% to 97%, it's not big course corrections that you have to do. People watching these videos, you know, they probably at a certain level in their life, but I'm guessing almost everybody wants more. And so you got to ask yourself, what is it that someone else does? They're not doing huge course corrections. They're doing small intentional action, and they're correcting and course correcting like flying an airplane. It's not these huge course corrections, but it's that top 3%. It's in that 97 percentile where success happens. And so I'm like, look, I'm not trying to get you from 0 to 50. I'm trying to get the people that are at 90 to get to 97, just a little bit more. And you can have everything that you want if you just change how you think. It's not working harder. It's just thinking differently. And again, I've seen it. I've been around many, many people, as you have, that are very successful, that tell me it's not how hard you work. It's not the amount of doors you have. It's not the numbers in your bank account. It's who you become and how you think. And I'm just a student of that, and I'm a big believer.
Who you become and how you think. Being able to embrace conflict in a loving and caring way. Being able to be not have resentment with people, right? Going back and what trauma, what everyone has in their life. How do we break that down, and how do we remove it? We become a different person. The different person allows us to do different things, because the person that you were then is not going to get you to where you want to go now if you don't change what's internal.
Yeah, there's a great book by a gentleman named Marshall Goldsmith, and it says the book is called "What Got You Here Will Not Get You There." So everything that the people you hang around with, the thoughts in your brain, everything that you do, the patterns, your identity, what got you to this point in your life is not going to get you to the next level. So you have to change something to get to the next level. And like you said, you have to be okay with admitting that you failed. You've got to be okay with the fact that you say, you know what? Yeah, I suck at this, and this is not something I should be doing. You have to be okay with those things to move forward, because I learned that the more that you try to tunnel vision and dig a line in the sand, the worse it is for everybody. And so the biggest challenge a lot of us have is we don't want our egos, we don't want to look dumb, right? Because for some reason, when it comes to success or it comes to money, those two things, people get very weird, right? They just do not, they have a hard time admitting that they don't make enough money or they're not as successful. But I look at it like, if you went to the gym, right? You can't lie about how much you bench press. You can't say, yeah, throw on 405 and let's give this a shot if you've never worked out before. It's going to be very evident very quickly that you cannot do that. But when it comes to money, we want to act like we know what we're doing, and we don't want to ask for help. But in other realms of our lives, we're always taught to ask and educate and be around like-minded people. And so that's what I try to do, and that's how I try to give back. I just try to let them understand it's okay not to know, but don't make that your excuse, right? I don't care what your problems are, right? I talk to someone and I tell them, look, when we hang up, I really don't care what your problems are. I've got my own. I'm here to help you, and I'm going to give you advice. But at the end of the day, I've got my own shit I got to deal with. You got your own shit you got to deal with. Let me help you. Take that, and then you do something with it. I'm not going to do it for you. And that's just how I believe,
So how did you start the group? What made you decide to have this weekly mastermind of 1,000 people signed up, and you said like 100? How did that come about? What was that? What was the inspiration? And
yeah, so when I sold my company about a year ago, I was kind of in a little bit of a lost land, we'll say, and I started working with the company that purchased my company, and I still work for them, Mynd Property Management. I'm head of their investor education for Mynd. And I just, I get a lot of people that say, man, I cannot believe how much knowledge you have. Like, could you share it with other people? Well, if I share it with one or two people, that's not getting it out to the masses. And I've always tried to think, like, how can I share it on a large scale with my own arena to control? Because, look, it's not a one video and you're done, right? It's not this one pep talk, pat on the back, and you're going to go out and change the world based on what I said. It's a matter of having continual conversations. And so I just, I had people asking me, and I had a friend of mine. Her name's Ashley Caird. She's a podcast host for Bigger Pockets. And she and I were talking. She's like, we should do a mastermind. And she had said, like, we've got so much. She has her own thing because she's in the middle of all the flipping and everything that she's doing. And it's kind of like the old versus new, right? I'm kind of old school. I've done it. I've been there. Now I'm looking at different options. She's kind of in the grind. So we kind of started doing this mastermind together where we talk to people about the down and dirty. I bring in contractors. I'll bring in hard money lenders. I'll bring in all these people. But every other week I talk about the mindset. So people are getting both. And, as long as I'm giving value and people like it, I'll keep doing it. If the value stops and people don't enjoy it, then I'll stop. I don't need to do it. It's not going to change my life. It's just, I'm just trying to give back. And so as long as there's people that are receptive for it, then I'll give back. If people say, you know what, I'm done, this is getting repetitive, I'm okay with that. Hopefully it doesn't, but I'm okay with that.
Maybe it will change. Maybe it will change your life. Maybe you'll help somebody so much or several people that it will change something. I don't know. Not that
I think, it's funny you say that because, if anyone follows me on social media, I'm tagged all the time by people, which is, I love it because I'm talking to people about I am statements and I'm talking to people about, daily rituals and habits and patterns. And, I'll do one-on-one coaching with them and I do it for free, right? I just help them and they're like, hey, can I talk to you? I'm like, yeah. So, sometimes I'll do it on Instagram Live for Bigger Pockets and I'll do a one-on-one coaching. And they tell me, they're like, man, you've changed my outlook on life, right? Now, you and I know that can fade if it's not backed up with a stronger why. So I can change them for the next couple of weeks. It's like somebody who wants to lose weight. They're out there running every day for the first week, and then it's like every other day, then it's once a week, then it's never again. And within 30 days, they're done. My goal is to keep them going. And I will say, I do feel good in a sense of accomplishment when I get people that reach out to me or tag me on Facebook or Instagram, and they're like, man, you have changed my outlook. And I'm having conversations with my spouse that I never had about real estate. I'm having those hard conversations. I'm eating the frog every day. So I would agree. It probably is changing me and making me feel better. And it's making me feel more confident. Like, okay, this is something people want to know. People are interested in this. This isn't hocus pocus. And look, I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not, look, life's hard. Shit happens. That's the reality. How you deal with it and how you handle it, that's another question. And so my thing is like, look, I'm not here to lie and tell you that, this is great. We're all going to be rosy, ride a unicorn over a rainbow every day. You're in an industry that's tough, right? You are going to be taken advantage of, but is it a you problem? Or is it a them problem? Did you enable that to happen? And if it does happen, okay, good things happen. Bad things happen to good people all the time. How do you address it and how you handle it is the key, right? It's not that something bad happened. It's like, what's your view from it? So the fact that I can do that and I can help people, that's my goal.
Yeah, that's great. I love the energy. So your son, he's got the one investment property.
He has one investment property. I'm trying to get him to buy more. He seems to be more into his car now, and he gets passive income. He gets passive income, and we do a split. 60% he gets to keep, 40% goes back into savings for a future property. That's a non-negotiable, and he has to do the numbers every month. If he doesn't do the numbers, he doesn't get his cash flow. So he's got to run the finances. So it could be 2-3 months later, and he'll say, "Hey, I haven't gotten any money," and we're like, "Yeah, we know. You haven't ran it. Like, we're not going to do it for you. You got to do it for you. This is the world. This is the world you live in. You want your money? You got to get shit done." And so then he realizes, okay, I got to work for it. I got to run the numbers because I don't want to teach my son to be a good employee. That's the big thing I tell people. People say like, "Oh, did he go in and do the rehab and did he knock out walls?" I'm like, no, I don't even do that. Why? I'd be hypocritical if I made him do it. I don't do that. I want to teach him to be a good business owner, not a good employee. And I think there's a difference with that. I don't think, and don't get me wrong, I don't think one is wrong. I don't think there's wrong with people doing that with their kids. That's just not what I want to teach my son. I don't want him to teach that you have to work hard for your money. I don't believe in that. So I'd be hypocritical to tell him to do it when I don't even prescribe by it. And that, again, that's just me. So yeah, he has the property. And he was interviewed on a podcast show with me, and I didn't know this, and I thought it was interesting. Someone said, what did you learn from the whole process of buying the rental property? And, again, you got to imagine when you're talking to a 14-year-old and I'm explaining like a mortgage and taxes, and they don't know these words. To us, they're common nature, right? We use them every day. To him, he's like, he's like, wait, it's renting for $1,600. You mean I don't get $1,600 a month? And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. So I've got to explain all this to him. And so, you know, I'm learning because I'm learning how to teach it. So I'm teaching him. But what he said he learned that there's a lot more opportunities out there than he'd ever realized. And so he started buying and selling other items and products that weren't real estate related. But he said that stemmed from him understanding how money works and just kind of getting an understanding about the process and flow of money and finances. So hopefully he'll buy more. I hope he does. If he does, I'll help him and get him all the way. But, you know, we'll see how it goes.
You should wrangle in some of his friends.
Yeah, he should start a fund.
Yeah, exactly. It's never too early.
It's kind of funny when he's you know, he's in 11th grade now, but you know, he was 9th, 10th grade, and he would talk to his teachers and they would say, oh, you know, you got to learn about business, this and that. And then he would tell them, well, you know, I own a rental property. And they're like, what'd you say? And then he would tell them, and the teachers are like, I don't even own a rental property. Like, how again, same question. How'd you do that? And so he's like, I just asked my dad. And then they're like, oh, your dad must have done it all. And he's like, actually, no. Like, I had to run the numbers. I had to do the finances. I had to do it. My dad, you know, guided me, but he had to tell me if it was a good deal or bad deal. I found the deals for him, but then he had to run the numbers on them.
That's remarkable. That's really cool stuff. It's you know, the way that anyway I grew up was more like you work hard, you put your time in,
yeah,
put your head down, you know, maybe come up for air here and there, but now the way of the world with how we're so, you know, connected.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, and same way, you know, I grew up in a middle class family. You know, I mean, great parents and everything. I didn't come from this hard world or whatever. I'm a regular. Grew up in L.A., East Los Angeles, and my dad was a pharmacist. And I remember some weeks. I remember him coming home, and he worked like 108 hours some weeks, like 108 hours in a week. I remember, and I mean, he was a pharmacist. He stood on his feet all day long, and he had health issues because of that down the road, but. You know, and that's the mentality. That's what you do, right? You don't have a choice like that. It wasn't even like, hey, Dad, you shouldn't be working so hard. It was just like, that's what you do, you know, to support the family. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think that you know, we have evolved as a society where it's more of a technology base. It's not a hard working base. And so again, you've got to go with what is the current, right? It'll probably change again for him, for my son, right? He'll probably have a different way of earning money and earning a living than I do, than my father did, than his father, you know? And that's just the evolution of finances.
Yeah. It's constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
And it's a good thing. I believe it's a good thing long term. Yeah. What are you seeing like right now with the investing world and investing COVID? Yeah. Some people have been sitting on the fence, I've seen.
I think myself, I think a lot of people, myself included, I'm kind of sitting waiting. It kind of, right now, everything's going in a frenzy. It kind of reminds me, someone told me, and I thought it was a perfect analogy. It's like the big firework grand finale before it goes dark. So everyone's buying and all this stuff, you know, everywhere I talk to people all over the country, and everyone's telling me how crazy it is. You can't get properties, this and that. I think that's fear. I think that's people are starting to get into that fear mode of, I better hurry up and get something. I better hurry up. The other investors, like myself, are just sitting back and waiting till it does go dark. And then we can put on our night vision goggles and then we can go hunting for what we want. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity. I'm a firm believer that probably within the next 12 to 18 months, there'll probably be more wealth created than in the last decade from real estate. There'll be a lot of people that unfortunately will lose their real estate because they did not purchase correctly. They were like me, and maybe they ran off of emotions and they didn't run off the numbers. And then there'll be people like me that will come in and be opportunistic and find the deals when the numbers make sense and move the deals. The numbers don't make sense now, so it doesn't make sense for me to move forward until they start making sense.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely been tight inventory for investment opportunities for sure. Yeah. Especially here in Philadelphia and in most of the metro market. We're seeing the lower end, like under 4 is great, under 400,000. It's a good market. Higher end, over 800. Not in the city is tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
And I think it's going to change, right? There's a market where people are up high and they're going to push back down into the lower level. I don't see people pushing up into the mid. So I think some of that upper mid level range is probably going to take the biggest hit statistically, like it always does, right? There's just less people in that top of the pyramid, if you will. But I just think that that's, it's cyclical. And I think it's like, they say real estate, ever since I've been doing it, which seems pretty true, goes in about a 7-year cycle, right? You had 2001 crash, and then you had 2008 crash, right? Global recession. Then with about 2014, we had another kind of hiccup with the oil prices and stuff. Some of it was micro. And then we have it again. So, you can say that this is unprecedented and this and that. You know what? Just slap another name, whether it's 9/11, global recession, H1N1, oil prices, COVID. It's just another name on top of a cycle that's been going on since we've been recording real estate, and so everybody wants to make it seem so bad. I mean, I'm not sure if you were in real estate in 2008. I definitely was. And you would have thought the earth was flat and everything was falling off the edge of the earth with banks shutting down and everything. You look at it now and it looks like a little blip on a radar. You're like, that was 2008. Like, I remember like pandemonium going on and chaos. And it actively, if you looked at it on a map, it'd be like, oh yeah, that was 2008. There was some issues with the banks, but everything turned out. I think we're going to see the same thing here. I think you know what? It's like eating a bad meal. We're going to digest it. We're going to eat it, and then we're going to move on, and we'll go through it again, and we'll probably do the same thing to ourselves in another 5, 6, 7 years. It's cycles. And I think that if you look at old cycles, you can capitalize on them, or you can be doomed to repeat them and be victim to them. So it's just, again.
Yeah, I think it's cycles. I think it's also lifestyle cycles. I think there's cycles of people living in cities versus suburban. And I think based on where we are, people are definitely want more space, want to be spread out, less dense neighborhoods. So we've seen a mass exodus from suburbia into the city. And I think you're going to see more impact on the city of people going into the burbs or people going from the burbs to rural. I mean, and there's other factors in regards to that. People don't have to work downtown in cities anymore. If their boss, their company said you can work from home, that allows them to live somewhere that's maybe less expensive, more space. If you don't need to be right there and you don't need to be commuting, back and forth, if you did live further away. I mean, there's a lot of other factors that we didn't have prior to this that I think is going to be different. And I think location is going to be even more important in regards to something where the market is going more now than ever.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And it's evolving, right? It's going to be different than the last one. There's going to be different ingredients. There's different ingredients on this one. So I think it's just a matter of time, that it's never going to be the same. It'll have similar traits, but it's not going to be the same. And that's okay. And again, as long as you have, the biggest mistake I see people make is they do not pay attention to the numbers. They don't treat it like a business. They don't have a final goal. And so they don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. And they don't have anything to compare that to. So again, they make the numbers. And I was one of these people where, you make the numbers say what you want them to say. Well, the numbers are there for a reason. There's data there to tell you something. Whether or not you accept to listen, that's another story. And that's kind of where I fell into.
100%. I mean, a lot of times I would say, that deal doesn't work on paper. If I look at a deal on a napkin, so I call it the napkin deal. If I can't do it on a napkin, it's out.
Yeah. Keep it simple. So you don't need to look, we're not going to the moon here. This isn't rocket science. You can keep it simple. We're buying real estate, right?
I'm not talking about 100 unit syndication deal. I'm talking about, whether you're doing a flip or you're doing, the burr method, or you're just buying straight investment property with, rental income, whichever. I mean, you got to be able to do it on a napkin. It's always been, that's what I do it on a napkin. I'm like, do the deal. It's a good deal.
Yeah.
If I can, I'm like, I don't know. Not something I would do, but
No, you're right. You're 100%. A lot of people, I think a lot of people like to overcomplicate things that they don't need to be. And a lot of people, they want to either overcomplicate or undercomplicate. And look, the data is there for a reason. The numbers are telling you a story. You've got to listen to the numbers. You got to put your ego aside. You got to say, okay, despite what I want them to say, and the fact that I spent all this time looking for this deal and I found this deal and I like it because of blah, 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 blah. What are the numbers telling me? And are these numbers aligned with my strategy to get me to my goal? If they're not, then you got to pass. right? It's very simple. It either is or it is not. There is no gray. It either is or isn't. That's it. And the numbers are the deciding factor.
Like I always say, you're either sitting or standing, or you're pregnant or you're not, because you can't have sitting and standing. You can't be half pregnant, right? So
that's right.
That's
very true.
So, Steve, I want to know before we part ways today, I want to know what's going on with the airlines and the airports and everything that's going on with flying. I just booked a flight to Vegas yesterday to go to a small mastermind group, a private event. And I'm going to wear the mask, but what's happening?
Yeah, it's totally fine. I mean, they are cleaning the planes and they're doing all the things that they should do. You know, everybody has their own thoughts or beliefs on what's going on. I fly for the airlines. I fly all over the world. I was just in Sao Paulo, Brazil this weekend flying. I think everything is normal except wear a mask. I mean, it's really that. It comes down to that. That's the reality. The reality is if you wear a mask, you're probably going to be fine.
So we shouldn't feel unsafe to travel on a plane. It's safe. It's good.
Totally fine. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not a health official. I'm not claiming. I'm just saying it's business as usual. You know, and like everything, you know, airlines need the revenue. They need the passengers. People need to go somewhere. It's kind of common sense. At some point, you know, for whatever reason, everybody has their own beliefs. Maybe after the elections are over, maybe it won't be as big of a drama. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the world is functioning. The world outside of the U.S. is functioning. I go to other parts of the world. I go to Europe. It's functioning. So again, I'm not a very political person or anything, but I think there's a lot to be said if you stop and look around. But so yeah, I think it's totally fine. Wear a mask. You know, do what you're supposed to do. Do your social distancing. I think you're fine.
Hey, I figure that I gotta continue to live my life, and
absolutely, you got to keep living your life. That's 100% correct. 100% agree.
An event since January. Most of the way I do my business, 75% of it is non-existent. No lunches, dinners. Maybe you'll go back to those soon.
Yeah.
Events, charity, club, the private club, nothing. So you have to do the Zoom, and I kind of starting to get like enough is enough.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was doing a lot of speaking events. I was traveling all over, and so I agree. I'd love to get out there and start seeing people again. I mean, that's you know, we're three-dimensional: body language, tonality, and words. Right? That's how we communicate. And that body language is very hard when you're two-dimensional on a Zoom. And so there's a lot to be said. I think a lot of people hope that working remotely works. And I think for some positions it will, and maybe a certain percentage of it will. But the reality at the end of the day is humans need human contact. And I think that it will go back to that. I remember after the 2008 recession, same thing. The airlines were cutting back. People were using WebMD or WebEx just started or something. And people started going that path. And they were like, oh, it's going to be the end of it. And the airlines are like, it'll go back. And it always does. And I think in a couple of years, you'll see everything right back to normal. People traveling, because that's people want interaction, right? They need interaction. That's what we need.
Yes, I booked my vacation in my calendar for next year. Next August, my European trip.
Cool.
Meaning, like, it was supposed to be this month, 3 weeks. Italy, Greece. We travel to Europe often. That's kind of one of the things that we do. And we were there. We actually came back January 9th. We were there for 18 nights before that for holidays and everything. So to not be traveling afar is a little problematic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting a little stir crazy and they want to get out, which is understandable.
Well, we're here to support. We're here to support the airlines.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
You know, and I'm excited to speak with you in the next, I think, couple of weeks. We're going to be talking. So that you can ask me all kinds of real estate stuff. I'll be ready for that.
It'll be good. We'll have you on the Bigger Pockets. I do Bigger Pockets every Thursday at 2:30 Central.
Yep.
Facebook Live, and we go on and we get people asking questions, commenting. all that stuff, and it works really good. So yeah, well, it'll be a good experience.
I'm looking forward to it. But this is great. I am thankful and grateful for you today, Steve, for being on Be the Solution podcast. And I look forward, hopefully someday we can actually meet in real form, maybe one of the bigger podcast events when they start to have them again.
Yeah, absolutely. That, or we do maybe, you never know, we may cross paths at an event. I mean, this is a very interesting world, right? It's a very small world. I mean, that's how we were introduced.
One day.
Yeah, I'm sure our paths will cross in person.
Yeah, I can't wait. I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Have a great one, Steve.
Bye-bye.